Steven, got your second question, man. I like this question because it's about something that I actually kind of know a thing about. Here's a question. It says, to Orlando, tonight I was wondering what your take is on the Electoral College. Outdated and archaic, or a functioning, if quirky, system? Okay, here's the thing. I used to live in the South, right? And in the South, they always told me one thing. There's three things that you cannot talk about: politics, religion, and football. And I'm probably about to talk about all three. The elect. Here's the thing with the Electoral College. Here's the thing with Congress. Right now, it's very clear to everyone that ain't nothing getting done. And so to wonder if the Electoral College should change, you have to first realize the reality that it's not going to, because they Congress cannot pass something that's even made up, let alone something that's probably a real problem. But here's the thing. I don't think that the Electoral College is that it needs to be there. Here's why. If you were to switch to the popular vote, then every election would be determined by large cities, because politics for the most part is it's cultural. It's a cultural characteristic. So wherever you're living, you tend to be associated with that particular party. You would have to go back, and it's not always the case, but you know that's the same for anything cultural. Okay, religion is cultural. Football is cultural, right? Uh, statistically speaking. So, for example, myself, you might say, Torlando, you're a Mormon, so does that mean you're a Republican? No, because I was black and from Michigan long before I ever became a Mormon. And if you're black and from Michigan, you are probably a Democrat. And my parents were Democrats, my grandparents were Democrats. It's completely cultural. After a while, when I decided, hey, why am I a Democrat? I picked the reasons why I might be that way. But for the most part, uh, in politics, people just tend to become what they think that they seem like. So if they think that they seem like a Democrat, they're going to be a Democrat. If they think that they seem like a Republican, they're going to be a Republican. And then they justify that with whatever reason. Some people change based off of, actual principles, but let's get real. So here's why it's a problem on a cultural basis. If it was done all by the popular vote, New York, California would probably be the actual determining factor of who would win a general election. And the little guys would have no say. They practically already have no say, but they would really have no sway. But the way that it comes down to now is that you secure your areas, your states, and then it comes down to one or two states. And this year it came down to Ohio. No, it didn't really come down to Ohio. I mean, when we look back at it, it was kind of. I mean, let's be real. It was kind of a landslide. But at the time, people were like, "Oh, it's all coming down to Ohio." In Ohio, that's actually a pretty good representation of Middle America, in my opinion. I mean, you can tell when somebody's coming up out of Ohio. They look like they're from Ohio, but for the most part, uh, it's a pretty even state. Uh, what was I gonna say? Oh, so to me, I think the Electoral College comes in handy in terms of keeping things fairly distributed. But here's the problem. It's going to have to change because population is growing exponentially. That's, I mean, without sounding too obvious, that's kind of what's happening. But what you're going to see is that even smaller cities, people are going to gravitate to them like crazy. And then uh, that's that's look, like Detroit is a good example. In 10 years, Detroit is going to be the perfect example of how to turn something that's totally busted into something that's functioning. Because what they're going to do is they're going to shrink their city. Okay, right now it's way too spread out. They're going to shrink it up. Okay, and then you're gonna have you had already happening. You have all these artists going in. It's kind of like New York in the '70s. You got all these artists moving in. When artists move in, they tend to make things interesting, make things culturally interesting. When something becomes culturally interesting, that's when companies want to move in because they're like, this is a great place to live, and that's when gentrification happens. But what you'll see is that because Detroit is going to shrink, the population is going to become dense. And when the population becomes dense, that's when cultural identities start to melt together. And so that's going to start happening all over the place. You know, it's already been happening in Phoenix. It's happening in Minneapolis. It's happening everywhere. It'll probably happen right here in Bloomington. I mean, they got all these apartment complexes going up because everybody's trying to get into college. All I'm saying is that eventually it's going to have to change because you might have a place like Billings, Montana having a population of 3 million people. I don't know. Is that, you ever think about that?